welcome back to Whispers in the Dark. Turn the lights down low, settle somewhere quiet, and listen carefully. Some houses do not want to be remembered, some rooms do not stay empty, and some chairs are never meant to be moved. This is the story of the farmhouse on Dead Orchard Road, the story my family tried to forget, the story my sister Betsy stopped speaking about before she stopped speaking altogether. Now let's begin. When my sister Betsy and I were children, our family moved into a farmhouse that stood at the end of a long gravel road, far from the nearest town and farther still from anything that felt modern or safe. It sat alone between acres of dead yellow grass and crooked apple trees, its white paint peeling away in long strips like old sunburned skin. The roof sagged slightly at the center, as though the house had spent too many years tipping its head in shame. At night, the windows went black in a way that did not look like darkness from outside. It looked like something inside the house was pressing its face to the glass and refusing to blink. My father called it charming. My mother called it a fresh start. Betsy and I called it ours. We were too young to understand the difference between quiet and waiting. I was 9 that summer, small for my age, with scraped knees, and a habit of asking questions no one wanted to answer. Betsy was 7, all pale curls and enormous blue eyes, the kind of child strangers smiled at in grocery stores. She was gentle in a way that made adults lower their voices around her. She collected buttons, cried when moths burned themselves against porch lights, and whispered apologies to flowers when she picked them. The farmhouse had belonged to someone before us, of course. Every house has its ghosts, my mother used to say, though she meant old wallpaper, loose floorboards, stains that would not wash out. The previous owner had left much of the furniture behind. My father said it was because moving it would cost more than it was worth. My mother said it gave the place character. There was a roll-top desk in the study, swollen shut from damp. A brass bed frame in the spare room with one bent post. A cracked mirror above the upstairs landing that made your reflection look delayed, as if it had to think before copying you. In the kitchen, there was an iron stove no one used, black and hulking, its mouth shut tight. And in the living room, against the back wall, there was a chair. It was an antique wooden chair with a high back and narrow arms, made from dark wood polished so deeply it almost looked wet. Its seat was slightly concave, worn down by years of someone sitting in exactly the same place, exactly the same way. The legs ended in clawed feet, each one gripping a small wooden ball. The back was carved with vines and little flowers, though some of the flowers looked more like eyes if you stared too long. No one liked that chair at first, not even my father, though he would never admit it. He tried sitting in it once on our second day in the house. He was tired from carrying boxes and wanted to make a joke of it. He lowered himself into the chair with a dramatic sigh and said, "Well, this is the throne of the manor." Then he stopped smiling. His hands tightened around the arms. His face changed. Not fear, not exactly. More like he had suddenly remembered something terrible, but could not place where the memory had come from. My mother asked what was wrong. He stood so quickly, the chair scraped backward and hit the wall. "Splinter," he said, rubbing his palm, though I saw no blood. After that, the chair stayed where it was, pushed flat against the back wall of the living room, between a narrow window and an old cabinet filled with chipped china. Nobody sat in it. Nobody dusted it. It was simply there, part of the house, like the smell of damp plaster and apples rotting in the yard. The living room became the center of our days. It had faded green wallpaper, a threadbare rug, and a fireplace with a mantel made from gray stone. The ceiling beams were dark and heavy. One beam ran across the center of the room, thicker than the others, stained nearly black. In the evenings, Betsy and I would sit on the rug and play board games while our parents watched television. Sometimes the television signal faded into static, and the room filled with hissing snow. Sometimes, beneath the static, we thought we heard a woman humming. Not a song we knew, just a low, patient sound. The first strange thing happened during our third week in the farmhouse. Betsy and I shared a bedroom at the end of the upstairs hall. The room had slanted ceilings, yellow curtains, and two small beds placed opposite each other with a nightstand between each bed and the wall. On hot nights, the windows had to stay open because the house had no air conditioning. The air smelled like grass, old wood, and the sour sweetness of fallen apples. One morning, I woke up with my mouth dry. Sunlight had just begun to leak through the curtains. I rolled over and saw a cup of milk sitting on my nightstand. It was not one of our cups. It was a small porcelain cup painted with blue flowers. The milk inside was perfectly still, almost shining. Across the room, Betsy sat upright in bed, staring at her own nightstand. She had a cup too. "Did Mom bring these?" she whispered. I got out of bed and looked closer. The milk had a faint skin on top, wrinkled like old paper. A smell rose from it, sweet at first, then bitter underneath. I did not drink it. Neither did Betsy. At breakfast, we asked our mother if she had brought us milk during the night. She looked confused and said no. My father frowned and said maybe we had taken cups upstairs and forgotten. But Betsy and I knew we had not. That night before bed, I checked my nightstand twice. Empty. In the morning, there was another cup. This time it was water. Clear, cold water in a little glass tumbler, beaded with moisture, as if someone had just placed it there seconds before we woke. Betsy smiled. She was worried we would get thirsty, she said. "Who? The lady?" I stared at her. Betsy looked embarrassed, like she had said something too personal. "I saw her," she whispered, "last night." A cold feeling moved through me. "What lady?" Betsy pulled her blanket to her chin. She was standing between our beds, She was very tall. I could not see her face, but I knew she was smiling. I should have been terrified. Maybe part of me was. But Betsy said it so softly, so calmly, that fear had no room to grow. Children believe what they are given. If someone leaves water by your bed, they must care whether you wake thirsty. If someone stands in the dark and smiles, perhaps they are kind. We began calling her mother. Not our mother. Never that. Our real mother was alive and warm and smelled like lavender soap. This was different. Mother was what we called the woman in the house because she seemed to want to care for us. She left cups on our nightstands. She tucked Betsy's blanket under her chin on cold nights. She closed the window when rain blew in. Once, when I had a fever, I woke to find a damp cloth folded across my forehead, though my parents swore they had not come into the room. After that, Betsy loved her. I tried to. At first, Mother was gentle, a hand brushing hair from my eyes in the dark, a whisper from the hallway telling us to sleep, the scent of warm milk outside our bedroom door. Sometimes we would come home from school and find our toys arranged neatly on the floor, dolls sitting in a semicircle, marbles sorted by color, Betsy's buttons placed in careful patterns on the windowsill. My mother assumed Betsy had done it. Betsy insisted Mother liked things tidy. Then came the chair. It moved for the first time on a rainy Saturday in October. The sky was dark all afternoon, and water ran down the windows in crooked lines. My father was in the barn trying to patch a leak. My mother was upstairs folding laundry. Betsy and I were in the living room, lying on our stomachs in front of the television, watching cartoons through waves of static. The chair was against the back wall, where it always sat. I remember because I looked at it during a commercial and thought the carved flowers on its back seemed darker than usual. A few minutes later, I heard a sound. Scrape, slow and wooden. I looked over my shoulder. The chair had moved perhaps an inch from the wall. I sat up. Betsy did not look away from the television. Scrape, another inch. The sound was dry and deliberate, the legs dragging across the floorboards. No one touched it. No one stood near it. The chair moved by itself, facing us, as if it were being pulled toward the rug by invisible hands. Betsy, I whispered. She turned, saw the chair, and smiled. Mother wants to sit with us. The chair scraped again. I wanted to scream for my mother. I wanted to run. But Betsy stood up, crossed the room, and placed one tiny hand on the chair's arm. Not too close, she said sweetly. You will block the television. The chair stopped. Betsy patted it like a dog. I did not sleep that night. From then on, the chair moved often. Whenever we were distracted, it came closer. If we were playing cards, it crept toward the table. If my mother read on the sofa, it shifted across the floor until it faced her. If my father dozed in his recliner, the chair sometimes moved beside him, close enough that its carved arm nearly touched his. My parents noticed, of course. At first, They blamed us. My father accused me of dragging it around to frighten Betsy. My mother said old floors were uneven and maybe the chair slid. But chairs do not slide uphill across warped boards. Chairs do not turn themselves toward sleeping people. Chairs do not stop moving when you look directly at them. Once my father grew angry and carried the chair into the pantry. He shut the door and wedged a broom beneath the handle. That night, I woke to a terrible banging downstairs. Not loud at first, a soft thump, then another, then a frantic series of blows. So violent, the floor trembled under my bed. My mother screamed. My father ran downstairs. Betsy and I crept to the landing and watched from above. The pantry door shook, as though something inside was throwing itself against it. The broom snapped. The door flew open. The chair stood in the darkness beyond, centered perfectly in the pantry doorway. My father stared at it, breathing hard. Then the chair tipped forward onto its front legs, just slightly. Betsy giggled. My father grabbed the chair, dragged it back into the living room, and shoved it against the wall. His hands shook afterward. He poured whiskey into his coffee the next morning. After that, no one locked the chair away. Mother did not like being shut out. Winter came early that year. The orchard froze. The apples turned black on the ground, softening into rot beneath a crust of frost. The fields around the farmhouse became white and empty. Wind moved through cracks in the walls and made the house sigh all night long. The cups kept appearing. At first water, then milk again. Always 2 cups, one for me, one for Betsy. The milk looked fresh now, thick and white, with no skin on top. Betsy said it tasted sweet, though I begged her not to drink it. She only tried a sip once, or so she told me. She said Mother would be sad if we never accepted her gifts. After that, Betsy began changing. She grew paler. The blue veins in her wrists became visible beneath her skin. She slept longer and spoke less at breakfast. Sometimes I caught her sitting on the edge of her bed at night, holding one of those porcelain cups in both hands, staring into it as though listening. "What are you doing?" I asked one night. Betsy blinked slowly. She says I should finish it before it gets cold. Who says? Betsy looked toward the corner of the room. No one was there, but the shadows seemed gathered too thickly beside the wardrobe, shaped almost like a woman, with her head bent forward. I knocked the cup from Betsy's hands. It shattered on the floor. Milk spread across the boards. For 1 second, it was only milk. Then something dark began to bloom inside it, threads of black curling outward like ink in water. The room filled with the bitter smell I remembered from the first cup. My stomach cramped. Betsy burst into tears. From the hallway came a sound like a woman, inhaling sharply through clenched teeth. The next morning, my mother found 3 dead mice outside our bedroom door. They lay side by side, their bodies stiff, their mouths open, white foam dried around their teeth. My father said poison must have been left somewhere in the house. He set traps in the cellar. He searched the cupboards. He found nothing. The chair moved more after that, not just when we were distracted. Now it moved when we were watching. It would sit against the wall, silent and still. Then the front legs would lift a fraction from the floor. The back legs would drag forward. Scrape, pause, scrape, always toward the center of the living room, always beneath the black beam. When we pushed it back, the house grew colder. When we left it in the center, the air warmed and the walls stopped creaking. Mother wanted the chair there. At night, I began dreaming of the living room. In the dream, I stood barefoot on the rug. The chair waited in the center of the room beneath the beam. A rope hung from above, swaying gently, though there was no wind. The rope was tied in a loop at the bottom. From behind me, a woman whispered, "Help me up." I would turn but wake before seeing her face. Every time, my throat hurt afterward, as though I had been screaming. Betsy had dreams too, but hers were different. She said Mother showed her a garden where the apples never rotted, a room with 2 little beds, a table set for supper. She said Mother had children once, but they had been taken from her. She misses them, Betsy told me. We were sitting under the apple tree in the backyard, wrapped in coats. The branches above us were bare, crooked fingers clawing at the gray sky. "How do you know?" She told me. "When?" Betsy smiled faintly. "When you are asleep." I grabbed her arm. "Do not talk to her." Her smile vanished. "That is mean. She is not our mother." Betsy looked toward the house. In the living room window, the chair stood visible behind the glass. It was not against the wall. It was in the middle of the room, facing us. Betsy whispered she could be. After that, I hated the chair. I hated the way it waited. I hated its polished arms and worn seat. I hated the carved vines twisting up its back. I hated that Betsy touched it when she passed, dragging her fingertips along the wood like she was greeting an old friend. I told my parents everything, not the childish version, not ghosts and magic. I told them about the milk turning black, about Betsy drinking it, about the voice in the hall, about the dreams. My mother went very quiet. My father told me I was frightening my sister, but that night I saw him pour every cup of milk in the house down the sink. The next morning, new cups appeared anyway, not on our nightstands this time. On the kitchen table, 2 porcelain cups, painted with blue flowers, filled to the brim. My mother screamed when she saw them. My father lifted one carefully and sniffed it. His face tightened. He carried both cups outside and threw them into the frozen field. They shattered on a rock. For the rest of the day, the house was silent. No creaks, no hums, no whispers. That silence was worse. It felt like something holding its breath. That evening, while my mother cooked supper, we heard the chair moving in the living room. Scrape. My father stormed in. "Enough," he shouted. We followed him and found the chair halfway across the room. My father grabbed it with both hands and lifted it above his head. For a moment, he looked wild, almost unrecognizable, his face red, his teeth bared. He smashed the chair against the stone fireplace. The sound was enormous. One leg cracked, but did not break. He struck it again. The back splintered near the carved flowers. Betsy shrieked as if he had hit a person. My mother pulled us back. My father raised the chair a third time. Then all the lights went out. The room plunged into blackness. Something heavy dropped from the ceiling. There was a choking sound. My mother found the flashlight. The beam shook across the room. My father stood beneath the black ceiling beam with both hands at his throat. A length of rope hung around his neck, old and gray and frayed, though there had been no rope there before. The other end vanished into the shadows above. His feet still touched the floor, but barely. His toes scraped weakly against the boards. My mother screamed and ran to him. The chair lay on its side beneath him, broken but not enough. My mother climbed onto it, cutting her hands on splinters as she reached for the rope. I remember the flashlight rolling across the floor. I remember the beam of light pointing at the wallpaper, showing a stain that looked like fingers dragged downward. I remember Betsy crying, "Mother, stop. Please stop." The rope loosened. My father collapsed. He lived, but the marks around his neck stayed for weeks, purple at first, then yellow, then faint and gray like an old necklace. He never tried to destroy the chair again. He repaired it instead. The next day, without speaking to any of us, he glued the cracked leg, sanded the broken back, and polished the wood until it shone. His hands moved carefully, lovingly, as though he feared hurting it. My mother begged him to stop. He did not answer. When he finished, he carried the chair back to the living room and placed it against the wall. That night, the chair moved to the center of the room before midnight. No one put it back. Things worsened after that. The house became a place of small cruelties. Doors shut on fingers. Needles appeared inside folded towels. My mother found clumps of Betsy's hair in the bathroom sink, tied neatly with thread. The mirrors fogged from the inside. At night, someone walked the upstairs hallway with slow, dragging steps, stopping outside each bedroom door to breathe. The cups appeared everywhere, on windowsills, in cupboards, inside the bathroom sink. Once I opened my school satchel and found a porcelain cup wrapped in my spelling homework. Milk leaking into the paper, turning my name gray and soft. My mother stopped sleeping. She stayed up with every light on, sitting at the kitchen table with a Bible open in front of her, though we had never been a religious family. She grew thin. Her eyes sank deep into her face. My father grew quiet and obedient. If the chair moved, he let it move. If cups appeared, he threw them away only when he thought no one was watching. Betsy, though, became peaceful. too peaceful. She no longer seemed afraid of anything. She wandered the house at odd hours, talking softly to empty rooms. She smiled at corners. She stopped eating most food, saying it tasted wrong. She asked for milk every night before bed, and when my mother refused, Betsy wept until she vomited. One evening, I found her in the living room. The chair was in the center. Betsy sat on the floor before it, cross-legged, hands folded in her lap. The room was dim, though the lamps were on. "What are you doing?" I asked. Betsy did not look at me. "Listening." "To what?" "The story." I stepped closer. The air smelled sour, like spoiled cream and old rope. Betsy whispered. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They were noisy. They were hungry. They always wanted. Everyone left her alone with them. Her husband died in the field. The money ran out. The neighbors stopped coming. The baby cried and cried and cried. She only wanted quiet. My skin prickled. "Stop it." Betsy turned her face toward me. Her eyes looked wrong. Not different in color, just deeper, as if someone else stood far behind them looking out. "She made them milk," Betsy said. "Warm milk with sugar. They were so thirsty. They trusted her." I slapped her. I had never hit my sister before. The sound cracked across the room. Betsy stared at me, shocked. Then the chair moved. Not a scrape this time. It lunged. The front legs slammed down inches from my feet. The back of the chair snapped forward like shoulders bending. I stumbled backward and fell. The air filled with a roar of whispers, too many voices layered together, all saying the same thing. "Bad child." My mother rushed in and dragged me out. Behind us, Betsy began laughing. A woman laughed with her. That was the night my mother decided we were leaving. She packed in secret after midnight. 2 suitcases, warm clothes, birth certificates, the little cash she kept in a sugar tin. My father slept in their bedroom, though sleep was the wrong word. He lay on his back with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. My mother woke me first. "Quiet," she whispered. "Get your shoes." I asked about Betsy. My mother looked toward the hallway. "I will get her." But Betsy's bed was empty. We searched the upstairs rooms first, then the kitchen, then the pantry and cellar. No Betsy. The front door stood open. Cold air poured inside. Beyond the porch, fresh snow covered the ground. Small footprints led from the house to the orchard. My mother made a sound I had never heard before and ran outside without a coat. I followed. The moon was bright. The trees stood black against the snow. Betsy's footprints wound between them, passing beneath branches that clicked softly in the wind. We found her at the far end of the orchard, beside the oldest apple tree. She was barefoot in the snow, wearing only her nightgown. She stood facing the house. In her hands, she held a porcelain cup. My mother cried her name. Betsy turned slowly. Milk glistened on her lips. "I am not cold," she said. My mother took the cup and hurled it away. Then she wrapped Betsy in her coat and carried her back. Betsy did not fight. She only looked over my mother's shoulder at the farmhouse. In the living room window, a woman stood behind the glass. I saw her clearly for the first time. She was tall and thin, wearing a long dark dress that clung to her body as if wet. Her hair hung in loose strands around a face that was both pale and shadowed. Her neck was stretched too long. One side of it was bruised black, her head tilted at an angle no living person could hold. She raised one hand and pressed it to the window. Betsy raised hers back. My mother did not see, or pretended not to. We did not leave that night. Betsy became violently ill before dawn. She shook with fever. Her lips turned blue. My father drove through the snow to fetch the doctor, but the car died halfway down the road. The telephone line was dead. My mother stayed beside Betsy's bed, crying and praying and wiping foam from the corners of her mouth. I sat in the hall and listened to the chair moving downstairs. Scrape all day, toward the center, back to the wall, toward the center, back to the wall, like someone rehearsing. Betsy survived, though I sometimes wonder if all of her did. After that fever, she spoke less. When she did speak, her voice sometimes changed mid-sentence, slipping into a softer, older tone. She called my mother dear once, and my father dropped a plate. A week later, my father finally got the car working. We left with only what fit in the trunk. My mother did not bother locking the door. As we drove away, I turned in the back seat. The farmhouse watched us from the hill. The chair was on the porch. No one had carried it there. It sat facing the road, dark and upright, as if waiting for us to come back. For years, we did not talk about Dead Orchard Road. We moved into a small brick house near town. Then another house when my father changed jobs. Then, after my parents divorced, an apartment above a dentist's office where the air always smelled like mint and bleach. My mother forbade ghost stories. My father drank too much and died when I was 22, falling asleep in his garage with the car running. My mother said it was an accident. I have always wondered. At the funeral, I noticed faint gray marks around his neck, though he had been dead nearly 20 years since the farmhouse. Betsy grew into a quiet, beautiful woman with the same pale curls and blue eyes, though the softness in her had hardened into something distant. She never married. She never drank milk. She could not be in a room with antique furniture. Chairs especially troubled her. She always stood at parties. In restaurants, she changed seats 3 or 4 times before settling, and even then, she never let her back face an empty corner. Sometimes, when we spoke on the phone, she would go silent. "What is it?" I would ask, and she would say, "Nothing." I thought I heard scraping. I became a librarian, maybe because libraries are places where the dead speak only when asked. I liked paper records, dates, facts, things that could be placed in order and held still. That was how I found the article. I was 34. My mother had been dead 6 months. I was sorting through local newspaper archives for a historical project when I saw the farmhouse in a grainy black and white photograph. My breath stopped. The caption read, "Tragedy at Dead Orchard Road." The article was dated November 18th, 1912. The original occupant had been a woman named Eliza Ward, a widow. Her husband had died in an accident, crushed beneath a wagon in the Northfield. After his death, Eliza had fallen into debt and isolation. Neighbors reported hearing her children crying at odd hours. A boy of 9 named Thomas and a girl of 7 named Clara. One night, Eliza prepared warm milk for both children. She mixed it with sugar and rat poison. The children were found in their beds the next morning, each with a porcelain cup on the nightstand. The article described white foam around their mouths, their hands curled tightly in the blankets, their faces turned toward each other across the room. Eliza was found downstairs. She had hanged herself from the main beam in the living room. Beneath her body, knocked over, was a dark wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room. The photograph showed the living room before the body was removed. It was difficult to see at first. The newspaper ink had blurred with age, but I recognized the wallpaper, the fireplace, the cabinet of china, the black beam, and there was Eliza, suspended in the center of the room, head tilted, hair hanging forward. The chair lay on its side, beneath her feet. The same chair. I looked closer, though every part of me begged not to. Behind Eliza, near the far wall, there was a shape in the photograph that the article did not mention. 2 small pale blurs standing side by side in the shadows. Children, perhaps, or flaws in the film. One taller, one smaller, both facing the camera. I copied the article and brought it to Betsy. She lived alone then in a little house full of bright lamps and modern furniture. Everything was glass, metal, plastic. Nothing old. Nothing wooden except the floors, which she covered with rugs. When I showed her the article, she did not touch it. She read it where it lay, on the kitchen table. Her lips moved silently. Then she said, "Clara." "What?" The little girl. Her name was Clara. "Yes." Betsy closed her eyes. "I know." "How?" She looked toward the hallway. "I dreamed it. That night I stayed with her. We drank tea. We talked about ordinary things for as long as we could. Work, weather, a neighbor's dog. But the article lay between us on the table like a dead animal. Near midnight, Betsy said. She did not think she was killing them. I felt cold. Do not defend her. I am not. Betsy's voice trembled. I mean, she thought she was saving them. She thought the world had become too cruel. She thought hunger was worse than sleep. She thought silence was mercy. That is not mercy. No, Betsy said, but she still believes it is. The lights flickered. From somewhere in the house came a faint sound. Scrape. Betsy and I froze. There were no wooden chairs in her house. Scrape. Again. From the guest room, Betsy whispered, "You brought her back." I wanted to say that was impossible, but the newspaper article lay open on the table. The photograph of the chair was facing upward. The lights flickered again. Betsy stood and walked toward the guest room. I grabbed her wrist. "Do not." Her skin was icy. "She is lonely," Betsy said. "No, she has been lonely so long." The scraping came again, louder now. Wood against wood, though there should have been nothing inside that room except a metal bed frame and a plastic laundry hamper. I picked up the fireplace poker from beside Betsy's electric heater, ridiculous as it looked there, and pushed open the guest room door. The room was dark. The bed stood neatly made. The curtains hung still. The laundry hamper sat in the corner. In the center of the floor was a porcelain cup, blue flowers, milk to the brim. Betsy began to cry. I kicked the cup over. Milk splashed across the rug. Black threads curled through it. The house filled with a woman's scream. It came from everywhere at once. From the walls, the vents, the ceiling, Betsy's open mouth. The windows rattled. The lights burst. Hot glass rained onto the floor. I pulled Betsy toward the front door, but she collapsed, convulsing, her back arching so violently I heard something crack. A voice came from her throat. Not hers. Mine. I dragged her outside into the cold. Neighbors called the police. An ambulance came. Betsy spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The doctors called it a seizure. Stress induced, maybe. They did not explain the black burns on the bottoms of her feet, shaped like clawed chair legs. They did not explain why she woke each morning with the taste of milk in her mouth. After that, Betsy would not see me for almost a year. She said the article had opened a door. Maybe she was right. I tried to destroy my copy. I burned it in a metal trash can behind my apartment. The paper curled and blackened. The photograph was the last part to burn. For a moment, as the flames consumed it, I saw the chair in the image turn upright. Then the ashes scattered. For 3 months, nothing happened. Then I found a cup beside my bed. Not milk, water, clear and cold. I moved twice after that. It followed, always small things at first. A cup, a whisper, a smell of apples, the sound of a chair shifting in another room. I owned no antique furniture. I slept on a mattress on the floor. I kept every light on. It did not matter. Mother had found me, or perhaps she had never lost me. The older I got, the more I understood something terrible. The house had not been haunted by a woman who wanted children. It had been haunted by an action, a pattern, care twisted into murder, love rotted into possession. The cup by the bed, the chair in the center, the rope from the beam. It repeated because she repeated, and she repeated because somewhere in that ruined mind, Eliza Ward still believed she had unfinished work. She had killed 2 children. She had tried to take 2 more, Betsy and me, and she did not like failing. Betsy called me one winter, evening 15 years after we left the farmhouse. Her voice sounded strange, too calm. I went back, she said. I sat up in bed. What do you mean? To Dead Orchard Road. My mouth went dry. Why would you do that? I had to know. Know what? There was a pause. If the chair was still there. I gripped the phone until my fingers hurt. Betsy, it is. I could hear wind through the receiver. Are you there now? She did not answer. Betsy, are you at the house? Softly, she said. It remembered me. I was already reaching for my keys. The drive took nearly 2 hours. Dead Orchard Road was worse than I remembered, narrower and choked with weeds. The farmhouse stood at the end, abandoned, windows broken, porch sagging, roof caving in at one corner. No one had lived there in years. Betsy's car was parked outside. The front door stood open. I stepped inside with a flashlight. The smell hit me first. Rotten apples, sour milk, old dust. The hallway was littered with plaster and leaves. Wallpaper hung in strips. My flashlight beam shook as I moved toward the living room. The chair was there, against the back wall, perfectly clean. No dust on its arms, no mold on its seat. The wood shone darkly in the beam of my light. Betsy stood in the center of the room, beneath the black beam. A rope hung around her neck. The other end was tied above, but she was alive. Barely. Her toes touched the floor, just as my father's had. Her hands clawed at the rope. Her face was purple. Her eyes bulged, staring at me with horror and recognition. I ran to her. There was nothing beneath her feet. The chair was still against the wall. I tried to lift her, but she was heavier than she should have been, as if something were pulling her down from above. She kicked weakly. I screamed her name. Behind me, the chair scraped. Slowly, across the floor, toward us. It stopped beside me, offering itself, waiting. I climbed onto it and reached for the knot. The wood beneath my feet was warm. Something like fingers closed around my ankles through the seat. I cut at the rope with my pocket knife. The blade slipped, slicing my palm. Blood ran down my wrist. Betsy gagged. The knot tightened. The chair trembled beneath me, not with weakness, but excitement. A woman whispered in my ear, "Good child." I saw her then. Not fully. Never fully. A tall shape at the edge of my vision, suspended slightly above the floor. Her dress moved, though the air was still. Her neck stretched upward into shadow. Her face leaned close to mine. Her mouth was black inside. I cut the rope. Betsy fell. So did I. The chair tipped sideways with a violent crack, throwing me onto the floor. Betsy landed beside me, gasping, choking, clawing at her throat. I grabbed her and dragged her toward the hall. The chair slammed upright behind us. Not lifted, not pulled. It snapped upright like a living thing. Then it began to follow. Fast, we stumbled through the hallway. Betsy could barely walk. The house seemed longer than it had been when I entered. The front door receded into darkness. Rooms opened where no rooms should have been. A child cried somewhere upstairs. Another child laughed from the cellar. Cups appeared along the floor, dozens of them, porcelain with blue flowers, each filled with milk. We crushed them beneath our shoes. Milk splashed up our legs, hot and thick. Wherever it touched skin, it burned. The chair came behind us. Betsy fell near the door. I turned and saw Eliza Ward in the hallway. She stood behind the chair, hands resting on its back. Her face was visible now. I wish it had not been. Her eyes were sunken and wet. Her lips were cracked, stretched into a motherly smile. Her neck was broken at an angle, skin dark, and folded where the rope had bitten deep. Something moved beneath that bruised flesh, pulsing slowly. She looked at Betsy. "My Clara," she whispered. Betsy sobbed, "No." Eliza's smile widened. "My thirsty girl." The chair lurched forward. I picked up one of the unbroken cups and threw it at the ghost. It passed through her, striking the wall behind, but the milk splashed across her face. She screamed, not in pain, in rage. For one moment, the hallway returned to its true shape. The front door was close. I hauled Betsy through it. We collapsed into the weeds outside as every window in the farmhouse lit from within with a pale yellow glow. Inside, the chair scraped across the floorboards. Once, twice, then silence. I took Betsy home. She never recovered. Her voice was damaged from the rope, reduced to a whisper. The burns on her feet scarred black. She moved into my house because she could no longer be alone. For a while, I thought we had escaped again. Then Betsy began leaving cups of water beside my bed. She claimed she did not remember doing it. I believed her. Mostly. Sometimes I woke at night and found her standing in my doorway, her head tilted, her pale hair hanging around her face. "Go back to bed," I would say, and she would whisper, "Children get thirsty." I removed every cup from the house. She used bowls. I locked the kitchen cabinets. She filled her hands at the bathroom sink and carried water dripping down the hallway, leaving wet footprints outside my door. I begged her to fight it. She said she was tired. One morning, I found her sitting in the living room. I had bought only soft, modern furniture, a sofa, a low glass table, no wooden chairs. But Betsy sat as if on something solid, her knees bent, her hands resting on invisible arms. Her feet dangled inches above the carpet. I screamed. She opened her eyes. They were not blue anymore. They were dark, wet, and patient. "Mother is near," she whispered. That was 3 years ago. Betsy is gone now, not dead, not officially. One night she walked out of the house during a thunderstorm and disappeared. The police searched the nearby woods, the riverbank, the roads. They found nothing. But I know where she went. 2 months after she vanished, I returned to Dead Orchard Road with a can of gasoline and a box of matches. The farmhouse stood worse than before, half collapsed, strangled by vines. I poured gasoline through every room. The smell burned my nose. I soaked the walls, the floors, the stairs, the living room rug that somehow still lay beneath the black beam. The chair was in the center of the living room, waiting. Betsy sat in it. At least something like Betsy. Her skin was gray. Her curls hung limp. Her throat bore a deep purple ring. She looked at me with my sister's eyes and smiled with someone else's mouth. Beside her stood 2 children, a boy of 9, a girl of 7. Their faces were pale and swollen. Their lips were stained white. Each held a porcelain cup. Behind them, Eliza Ward hung from the beam without a rope. Her feet hovered above the chair. Her long fingers rested lightly on Betsy's shoulders. "You came home," Betsy said. I struck the match. For the first time, Eliza looked afraid. The fire took quickly. Old wood drinks flame like it has been thirsty for years. Curtains flashed. Wallpaper curled. The ceiling blackened. The children opened their mouths, and milk poured out, steaming as it hit the floor. Eliza screamed until the windows burst. Betsy did not move. I could not save her. I tell myself that every night. I could not save her. The farmhouse burned to its foundation. Firefighters arrived too late to do anything but keep the flames from spreading to the orchard. By dawn, Dead Orchard Road was ash, stone, and smoke. They found no bodies, no chair. I wanted that to be the end. But stories like this do not end. They only move. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. Not the one I found years ago. A different photograph. It showed my own living room, taken from the corner near the window. My sofa, my rug, my low glass table, and in the center of the room, where no chair had ever stood, there was the antique wooden chair from Dead Orchard Road. Betsy sat in it. She faced the camera. On either side of her stood Thomas and Clara Ward. Behind the chair, Eliza smiled. I dropped the photograph and ran to the living room. Nothing was there. No chair, no Betsy, no children. But on the glass table sat a porcelain cup painted with blue flowers, filled with milk, still warm. That night, I did not sleep. I watched the cup until sunrise. Just before dawn, the milk began to ripple, not from movement in the room, from something beneath its surface. A little bubble rose and popped, then another. Then a whisper came from inside the cup. "Drink." I smashed it with a hammer. The milk inside was black. Since then, I hear the chair every night. It starts far away, almost below the house. Scrape, then closer. Scrape. Sometimes it sounds like it is in the walls. Sometimes in the ceiling. Sometimes right behind my bedroom door. I have moved the bed against the door. I have covered the floor with salt. I have prayed. I have burned sage. I have called priests, mediums, investigators, men and women who promised they understood the dead. None of them came twice. One woman walked into my living room, looked at the empty center of the floor, and began bleeding from the nose. She left without a word. A priest told me some spirits are not trapped in houses. Some are trapped in invitations. A cup accepted, a chair used, a name spoken with love. Mother, that was our mistake. We named her. We made her family. Now, while I record this, I am sitting at my kitchen table. There is a lamp beside me, a glass of water I poured myself, and every chair in the house has been broken and thrown into the yard. I am standing as I tell you this last part, because the scraping has started again. It is in the hallway. Slow, patient, wood on floorboards. Scrape. The house is dark except for this lamp. The air smells like apples. My throat tastes bitter. There is something outside the kitchen door, something just beyond the light. I can hear a woman humming. I can hear Betsy whispering with her. They are not angry tonight. That is what frightens me most. They sound pleased. The doorknob is turning, and beneath it, in the narrow gap at the bottom of the door, something is sliding into the kitchen. A porcelain cup, blue flowers, white milk, filled to the brim. So before I go, let me leave you with this. If you ever move into an old house and find furniture left behind, do not assume it is abandoned. If you wake to find water beside your bed, do not drink it. If a chair moves closer while you are not looking, do not feel sorry for it. And if a presence in the dark seems gentle, if it tucks you in, if it hums you to sleep, if it leaves gifts because it says it loves you, remember that not every mother wants her children to live. Some only want them quiet. Thank you for listening to tonight's story. Please subscribe, comment, and like the video for more. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment so divine. Whispers of